Hello and welcome back to Indus News with me, Usman Lone. Well, we begin this hour with our top story, and that's from Pakistan, where Prime Minister Imran Khan says the Kashmir issue is a humanitarian problem. He was addressing a public gathering in Muzaffarabad on the Pakistani side of Kashmir, and the Prime Minister said India is following a Nazi ideology to suppress Muslims. More in this report.
Prime Minister Imran Khan once again reiterated Pakistan's support for the Kashmir cause. He said millions of Kashmiris are living under a siege for the last 40 days. He added that over 900,000 Indian troops are persecuting Kashmiris.
Narendra Modi!
A brave man cannot do such things to women and children what Narendra Modi and his RSS is doing to Kashmiris. Narendra Modi, I want to give you a message today. No matter how much oppression you do to Kashmiris, you will never succeed because Kashmiris have become fearless now.
He said Indian actions in occupied Kashmir have internationalized the issue.
Kashmir issue was discussed in UNSC after 50 years. After that, for the first time, European Union said Kashmir issue should be resolved as per UN resolutions. It means Kashmiris will be allowed to decide their future through referendum. Moreover, 58 countries supported Pakistan's stance at UN Human Rights Council.
The Prime Minister said Indian actions in the occupied region will fan extremism. He went on to say that Pakistan is a peace-loving nation, but it will give a befitting response to any Indian misadventure.
Last time we returned captured Indian pilot because we did not want war with India. But Narendra Modi, make no mistake, if you again try to do any misadventure inside Pakistan, then we will give a befitting response. We will fight till our last breath.
He pledged to effectively raise the issue at the United Nations General Assembly later this month. Tensions between India and Pakistan increased after India stripped occupied Kashmir of its autonomy last month.
Staying with the Kashmir issue, in Pakistan has called on the United Nations Security Council to push India to end the lockdown in occupied Kashmir. Pakistan's permanent ambassador to the United Nations, Malia Lodi, says the Security Council has failed to implement its resolutions on Kashmir. Speaking at the General Assembly, she said the bloodbath in Indian-occupied Kashmir has gone unchecked for over 70 years. Ambassador Lodi said over 95,000 Kashmiris have lost their lives. She said Pakistan seeks a council that is democratic, effective and accountable to member states. Now to Afghanistan, and a US Congressional House panel has issued a subpoena to Special Envoy Zalmay Khalilzad, demanding an explanation for the failure of US Taliban peace talks. Foreign Affairs Committee Chairman Elliot Engel says Khalilzad will appear before the House panel on September the 19th. Meanwhile, in a televised interview, Taliban spokesperson Sohail Shaheen said the group had concluded the peace accord with the US. He said if the Americans withdraw from the deal, a safe exit of US troops from Afghanistan cannot be guaranteed. Peace talks between the United States and the Taliban began last October in Qatar. The discussions were held to end nearly 2 decades of war in Afghanistan. Well, for more on this, we are joined by political analyst Hamidullah Hamdard on the line from Kabul. Hamidullah, welcome to Indus News. Now let's get into it. Both sides say they will no longer talk to end the war in Afghanistan. What effect will this have on the country itself and Afghanistan's upcoming presidential elections?
First of all, I think there will be peace talks restarted very soon, but there are some conditions for that. The Taliban do not have to escalate the violence in killing off the civilians and even the Afghan army, and they have to stop the explosions during the peace talks. One of the statements of Zalmay Khalilzad, in which he had said that nothing will be agreed upon until everything is agreed upon, is very important to understand both by Taliban and the Afghan government. In this statement, he has made it very clear that in the first step of, or the first round of the peace talks, Taliban will have to talk with Zalmay Khalilzad, who is special representative of the US for the Afghan reconciliation. And when they agree, when they are agreed upon the peace deal that they have with each other, in which they have to talk or agree upon two things. One, which is the withdrawal of the US and foreign forces from Afghanistan. Second thing, which is that Taliban will not plan any attacks from Afghanistan to threaten the neighboring countries and international community or other countries like US, UK, and other countries. In the second step, Zalmay Khalilzad was supposed to make Taliban ready or get Taliban to the negotiating table with the Afghan government, which is representing the people of Afghanistan, so that this peace negotiation could succeed.
You mentioned Zalmay Khalilzad trying to get the Taliban to speak with the government. Now, we know the Taliban's been speaking to the United States, but what about the government in Kabul? Do the politicians in Kabul believe the peace process will be revived anytime soon?
Exactly. Without that, we cannot stop the war. Even if Trump is angry at the Taliban at the moment, that is not a big concern, but it is a concern at the moment. Still a concern, because Taliban will have to change the way they are going on, the way they are moving ahead. If they really have the intention to conclude this peace deal with both the US and the Afghan government, then of course they have to accept to go for the ceasefire during the peace talks, and after that they have to agree to talk with the Afghan government so that we have a stable and long-term peace in Afghanistan. The Afghan people do not want to go for any civil war or to enter any civil war due to the mistakes of the negotiators of this peace deal. The Afghan government is very carefully moving forward to make sure that there is a stable peace in Afghanistan, a durable peace in Afghanistan with the Taliban. And they are also paving the ground for the Taliban to come into the government, to join the government, to be part of the government. They have even accepted them as a political party.
Hamidullah, thank you for your time. That was political analyst Hamidullah Hamdar joining us from Kabul. Now, US President Donald Trump says he will consider an interim trade deal with China until a permanent pact can be reached. The president's remark comes as the world's two largest economies prepare for a new round of talks to resolve their trade war. China has renewed purchases of US farm goods and excluded some American goods from retaliatory tariffs. President Donald Trump has reciprocated by delaying a tariff hike on Chinese goods by 2 weeks. But Trump says he would prefer to finalize a full-fledged agreement with Beijing.
I see a lot of analysts are saying an interim deal, meaning we'll do pieces of it, the easy ones first. But there's no easy or hard. There's a deal or there's not a deal.
In New Zealand, Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern has tabled a new bill in Parliament to further tighten the country's gun laws. The bill marks 6 months since the terrorist attacks on 2 mosques in Christchurch, which killed 51 Muslims. This is New Zealand's second round of gun reforms after the government identified weak weapon laws as a key reason behind the terror attack. The bill includes the creation of a registry to monitor and track every firearm legally held inside the country. It also tightens rules on licensing, binding individuals to renew their license every 5 years instead of 10. And earlier, Prime Minister Ardern said the government took action to remove semi-automatic weapons, and now it moves a step further.
Today, the government has also introduced legislation into the House that will help ensure gun ownership is restricted to responsible users and stop the flow of guns into the black market.
Now to Brexit, and Britain's Prime Minister Boris Johnson says he's optimistic about striking a Brexit deal ahead of his talks with European Union chiefs next week. He is due to meet European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker and the EU's chief Brexit negotiator Michel Barnier on Monday. Speaking at a conference in Yorkshire, the Prime Minister said his government is working hard to get a deal. The Prime Minister said British people want to leave the EU and that he will take the UK out of the bloc on 31st of October.
So whatever the shenanigans that may be going on at Westminster, we will get on with delivering our agenda and preparing to take this country out of the EU on October the 31st. And there will be ample time for Parliament to consider the deal.
Now, the United Nations Refugee Agency has expressed regret at the impact of a US Supreme Court ruling that will have people fleeing war and persecution. The top US court has approved an application by President Donald Trump to curtail asylum applications at the border with Mexico. UN High Commissioner for Refugees spokesman Andrei Maciej said all people must follow access to full asylum procedures and international protection. Addressing journalists in Geneva, Maciej voiced concerns for displaced Central American families in need of a safe haven. Italy has reached a deal with several EU countries to take in migrants aboard a charity ship in the Mediterranean. The Ocean Viking is carrying 82 Africans rescued in various operations off the coast of Libya. 17 minors are among the migrants on the French rescue vessel. It's run by two NGOs, SOS Mediterranean and Doctors Without Borders. Earlier, a pregnant woman and her husband were rescued from the ship and taken to Malta due to a medical emergency. The ship is currently stranded at sea between Malta and the Italian island of Lampedusa as Rome considers its request for a safe port. The new Italian government has promised to change its response to the migrant influx following the departure of hardline Interior Minister Matteo Salvini. Ukraine says it's planning a roadmap to implement a peace deal with Russia aimed at ending the Donbass conflict. President Volodymyr Zelensky said he will discuss the plan at the Normandy talks with Russian, German and French leaders. Zelensky said he expects to meet US President Donald Trump at the peace talks. Ukraine has been fighting Russian-backed forces in the eastern Donbass region for the last 5 years. Despite a ceasefire after the Minsk Agreement of 2015, the conflict has killed more than 13,000 people. Earlier, Russia and Ukraine completed a prisoner swap, serving as the first step to ease bilateral tension ahead of the talks. 5 major European countries have expressed deep concern about Israel's plan to annex parts of the Jordan Valley. In a joint statement, France, Germany, Italy, Spain and the UK said the annexation will be a serious breach of international law. The EU nations called upon all parties to refrain from actions which put the two-state solution for Palestine and Israel in jeopardy. Earlier, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said he will impose Israeli sovereignty on the Jordan Valley and the northern Dead Sea if he's re-elected. The Organization of Islamic Cooperation has called an emergency meeting over Netanyahu's plan. Well, don't go anywhere, as I'll be back with more news after this short break. Hello and welcome back to Indus News. Now, Russia says it believes that the war in Syria is over. In an interview, Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said the war is now confined to 2 areas not controlled by the government. Lavrov said Russia is now focused on organizing humanitarian assistance for Syrians. He said Moscow is working to establish a political process to stabilize Syria and the rest of the Middle East. He also said that the US and EU sanctions against the Syrian government are counterproductive. Earlier, President Vladimir Putin said Russia will continue to support the Syrian government against rebels. Meanwhile, the New York Times has reported that the Pentagon is preparing to deploy 150 troops to northeast Syria. The US troops will conduct joint ground patrols with Turkish forces in a safe zone established to prevent a Turkish military incursion. The UN has warned that some 2 million people in Somalia are at risk of starvation. The country is currently facing its worst drought since 2011. The UN's relief chief Mark Lowcock says decades of conflict and a lack of investment has made the crisis even worse. Speaking at the end of a 2-day visit, Lowcock said droughts have become more frequent. He said erratic rains have triggered reoccurring floods in the country. The UN's recent food security analysis shows the April to June harvest was the worst since 2011. Some 2.6 million people have already been displaced as a result of natural disasters. In southwest Somalia, almost 400,000 people have fled drought, terror attacks and armed conflicts in the past 3 years. In Brazil, a fire at a hospital killed 10 people in Rio de Janeiro. The city's fire service says 90 patients were transferred to other hospitals. 4 firefighters were also injured while trying to put out the fire. Hospital authorities pointed to a short circuit as the probable cause of the fire. Rio Mayor Marcelo Crivella said he could not rule out sabotage. 11 people have been killed after a boat capsized during a religious ceremony in the central Indian state of Bhopal. Around 20 people had set out in a boat to immerse a huge worshipping idol in a lake near Katlapura Ghat. Police say 5 others have been rescued, while a search for survivors is underway. The state's Chief Minister Kamal Nath has ordered an inquiry into the accident. 2 days of torrential rains have killed 4 people in southeastern Spain. Authorities have evacuated 1,500 people. Floods swept away cars and debris in the regions of Valencia, Murcia and eastern Andalusia. Officials said many people were stuck in flooded highway tunnels. Alcaraz's mayor said the situation is critical as all the municipality is inundated. Some affected areas saw record rainfall for September. 2 airports, train networks and dozens of roads are closed. Authorities have advised citizens in affected areas to stay at home and avoid using their cars. Spain's Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez says emergency services are working to minimize the storm's effects. A new storm has brought rain and winds to the Bahamas, still recovering from Hurricane Dorian. The National Hurricane Center says it could become a tropical storm. It says the weather system is likely to pick up speed as it moves northwest and probably hitting Florida by Saturday. But the tropical cyclone is not expected to bring the same level of destruction as Hurricane Dorian. With 1,300 people still missing, the Bahamian government is focusing on search and rescue operations. Scientists say the biggest glacier in the Swiss Alps could melt away by the end of this century if global warming continues. Cutting-edge simulation technology shows how the mighty Aletsch Glacier will change as the planet temperatures rise. The glacier weighs in at 11 billion tons and covers 86 square kilometers of the Swiss Alps. Its tongue has already retreated by a kilometer since the turn of the century. Scientists now predict that the trend will continue even if the world can meet the 2015 Paris Agreement climate controls. In August, Iceland paid tribute to its vanished Ökokul ice sheet to bring the climate calamity to the world's attention. Now, staying with the climate and climate change group Extinction Rebellion have announced mass demonstrations in London from the 7th of October. The group says it will shut down major roads near Britain's Parliament in Westminster. It said it will shut down London to force the government to act now on the climate and ecological emergency. Earlier, police arrested 2 of the group's activists at Heathrow Airport. Airport authorities say they attempted to bring the airport to a standstill by flying drones nearby. Events are underway across China to celebrate the Mid-Autumn Festival, which falls on Friday this year. In East China's Zhejiang province, police are taking part in Lianhou performances, also called firewalking. Performers walk barefoot across burning coals. The fire is used to ward off evil spirits and pray for good fortune. In Wanzai, locals enjoy folk activities as they celebrate the festival. Colourful lanterns, tasty food, firework displays and traditional opera leave a deep impression on tourists. Now, in other news, diving deep in rivers, seas and oceans is a task that requires enormous strength of the mind and body. Free divers, it's called, and they're from all over the world, and they're proving their point in France, where they've gathered to dive below 100 meters on the French Riviera. More in this report.
Free divers from all over the world are exploring the depths of the Mediterranean Sea in this year's AIDA Depth World Championship. Russian free diver Alexei Markanov descended to a depth of 118 meters in more than 4 minutes without taking a breath. The 8-time champion Markanov also holds the constant weight free diving world record of 130 meters.
Well, today it was much warmer, so it felt great. I've had a good warm-up, and the dive was amazing. Like, it was very relaxing, very confident.
Divers can compete in different disciplines in the 2-week championship. Free divers must not only master breath-holding techniques, but also equalization, relaxation, and how to use the body's weight for propulsion.
We're really focused so we no longer feel what happens around us. It's about execution, a process that we work on for months. So we are really into the execution, immersed between ourselves and what we are doing.
The competition is being held from September 2nd to 15th on a 400 square meter offshore platform.
Well, we'll be back with news from the world of business and sports after this short break. Hello and welcome back now to business news. And the London Stock Exchange has rejected the Hong Kong Exchange's $39 billion takeover offer. The LSE says it will stick to its planned acquisition of data and analytics group Refinitiv. The LSE says that the Hong Kong-based company's proposal has fundamental flaws. It says the LSE sees no merit in further engagement with the Hong Kong Exchange. The company says the ongoing situation in Hong Kong adds to uncertainty for shareholders. It also said that the exchange's relationship with the Hong Kong government will complicate matters. Google has agreed to pay a $1 billion settlement to end a tax dispute with France. The payment comprises a fine of $503 million plus additional taxes of $514 million. The fiscal fraud probe that began 4 years ago investigated Google's non-payment of dues to France. Investigators claim the tech giant avoided tax by not declaring parts of its activities. The payment follows similar out-of-court settlements by Google in Italy and Britain over recent years. Google says it now wants to see a coordinated reform for a clear international taxation framework. French Justice Minister Nicole Belloubet said and Budget Minister Gerald Darmanin have welcomed the arrangement. Well, it's 36 degrees here in Lahore, but let's take a look at the weather around the world. Well, that's all from me and the team here in Lahore. I'll be back at the top of the hour with the headlines. Bye-bye.